Welcome to CryptoPsychedelic. My name's Daniel. I'm one of the organizers and co-founders of CryptoPsychedelic. We're on behalf of this gentleman, I would like to thank you all for coming. We're grateful that you made it. I'd also like to thank the staff for taking such good care of us.
Absolutely.
And I've been talking to the staff and I've been talking to you guys, and some of the things that you've been saying is that very consistently is everybody that you've come in contact with is amazing and interesting. And why is that? Why is everybody here so interesting and amazing? And I don't really know. But one thing is, like, what kind of person just comes to an event that they have no idea what it is? Right. Like, it's really nice. It's really nice that people can step out of the left brain a little bit. And you don't have to know exactly what it is rationally, but you can kind of just feel it out and intuitively know I belong there, and I belong with the people that are here. Yes. So, also, the kind of person that can drop everything and come to Tulum for CryptoPsychedelic, we realized you could be anywhere. Like, you could literally be anywhere in the world, and you chose to be here with each other. You chose to come and think about these kinds of questions, see what this intersection is all about, and that speaks volumes. We don't really know what CryptoPsychedelic means, necessarily. And I don't think that the answer is something that can be just wrote. It's not just a sentence. The answer of CryptoPsychedelic, I believe, is something that has to be lived. You know, it's an exploration. And so that's what we're doing here today with our panel. And we're going to do that through the lens of health and healing, some social justice work, some policy work. And I'm really excited to hear what these folks have to say. I do have one crypto-psychedelic idea I'd like to share with you. It's the most crypto-psychedelic meditation that I've come up with. And it's the story of Indra's web, which is a story from Vedic mythology. And in Indra's web, there's an infinite net. And at each node, at the center of the web, there are these diamonds, these beautiful, perfect crystalline diamond. And every diamond perfectly reflects every other infinite diamond. And in Vedic culture, Vedic mythology, this represents consciousness. And it's something that I actually like to sit with. You know, I like to sit and feel myself connected to you guys. I like to feel myself connected to the world at large. And I encourage you throughout the course of the evening to also allow yourself to be that diamond-like jewel and to recognize that we all reflect each other perfectly. And with that, I would love to let my panel introduce themselves.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Yes.
It's wonderful to be here. My name is Liana Gillooly. I have spent the past several years running an organization called the ArcView Group, which is the largest investor network for the cannabis industry. And throughout my time as well, I've spent the past about 6 years also fundraising for psychedelic research on the side, and been very focused on pushing that agenda forward. I recently left my full-time position at ArcView with this very plush and successful cannabis job to pursue launching an ICO and launching a healthcare blockchain company. So that's a little bit about me. Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Hi, my name is Natalie Ginsberg, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director at MAPS, which, for those of you who might have missed this morning, is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And our mission is developing medical, legal, and cultural context for people to benefit from the use of cannabis and psychedelics. Before my work at MAPS, my training is that of a social worker, and I was working as a guidance counselor in a middle school in the Bronx, and also at an alternative sentencing court for people arrested for prostitution, and instead they would go to mandated therapy. And that work really got me actually interested in policy change, because I was seeing that all of these systemic issues were really what were impacting my individual clients or people that I was working with. So that really drives a lot of my work with psychedelic policy and research, and that's what also is really exciting to me about the crypto world, which is something I'm newer to and learning about, and I'm just really excited to see how these two approaches that are really talking about systemic change can learn from each other and work together.
My name is Patrick Kroupa. During the 1980s, I was involved in the hacker underground, and that eventually led to establishing the third internet access provider in North America, and the very first in New York City, called Mindbox. And during the period of time when I was doing this, I was also shooting speedballs. And that was a lot of fun, and it worked out for a while until it didn't. And I tried literally every detox that was available at the time, and nothing worked for me until I tried this psychedelic drug called Ibogaine, which did. That was a fucking miracle for me. It changed my life, and I was not very in tune with the normal standards of aftercare, which are, you know, go to another 12-step meeting, hold up your hand, say, I am an addict, and I'm a diseased and flawed piece of shit forever. It didn't seem very empowering or positive. So I went to Thailand, and I lived in an ashram there for 3 months. And I came back, and so I ended up working at the University of Miami's Ibogaine research project, because for a very brief burst of time, it looked like it may be a medication available to everybody, because it received FDA approval, clinical trials were progressing, and then everything kind of ground to a halt. Anyway, at the present time, one of the advisors to an Ibogaine clinic called Clear Sky Recovery, which is an evolution of what started in the 90s. And so I'm coming at this both from a technological perspective, because I got involved with Bitcoin in 2010, late 2010. I had a Mac Pro with a graphics card, and back then that was really all you needed. I was, yeah. You could get, there's that thing called the Silk Road that was really handy, and basically my involvement with crypto was entirely practical, accidental, then practical, and then we find ourselves in right now, which is like, holy shit. And it's an interesting intersection of all these different paradigms and cultures. And thank you very much.
Hello everybody, my name is Sterlin Lujan. I am the chief fall guy for Bitcoin.com, so if anything bad happens, I'm going to be the one that bites the dust. I'm totally kidding. So I'm the communication ambassador for Bitcoin.com, so my role is to travel to conferences, deliver keynote presentations, and talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and how this technology is going to revolutionize and already is revolutionizing everything that we do in society today. I also, as part of working for the company, I also have a responsibility, and this is really a self-inflicted responsibility, to let everybody know that governments are becoming more and more obsolete and irrelevant as we move into the future. And this is really important, especially for what we're doing here with CryptoPsychedelics. So in terms of my experience with psychedelics and being in this community, it actually, kind of like Patrick, I was involved in that space prior to Bitcoin, prior to cryptocurrency. So very early on in roughly 2009, I was involved in the rave scene out in West Texas. So I spent a lot of time at the Lizard Lounge in Dallas, Fort Worth, and at this point in time, I fell in love with the pharmaceutical compound MDMA. Anybody's familiar with MAPS who are right here? So this is basically how it happened. I got involved in the rave scene. I took MDMA. It totally transformed my life. I had what the Zen Buddhists refer to as an experience of Satori. I was completely shaken to my core by MDMA because it allowed me to look at myself from a bird's eye perspective. And when I was having the peak experience, the culminating experience on MDMA, I remember telling myself that I'm a lot smarter than I ever thought I was. And I repeated this like a mantra because when I was in grade school and growing up, I was in remedial math classes. I was basically told that I was a nobody and wasn't going to grow up to be anything substantial. Of course, here I am right now sitting in this conference speaking to you all and learning from all these awesome individuals here. So. But long story short, very long story short, I got so enraptured with the MDMA experience that I thought I was going to be a spiritual technician and I was going to pass MDMA on to all of my friends. And I said, no, we're not going to go dance. We're going to sit in our living rooms on a gaming chair and we're going to chat about life, reality, and we're going to talk about Aristotle and Plato and Greek philosophers and spirituality. And that's what I did for a couple of months there. But then it came to a point where I was starting to sell MDMA at mass quantities, and a buddy of mine who was helping facilitate that process actually took some MDMA and sold to an undercover narcotics agent. At that point in time, my house was immediately raided by the state police in Texas, by the marshal, the Texas marshal, and the local police department. I was charged for being engaged in organized criminal activity for possessing a large quantity of MDMA, I think 500 pills and 30 grams of cocaine. So I was, of course, immediately ushered off to a cage and kidnapped by the police and then held for ransom. Eventually, I was able to get out of that, and I went to there. Actually, I usually jump ahead on the story, but I had a year time to think about my actions before I went to court to basically explain that I was a good kid and I had done no wrong, at least in my mind. Anyway, during that year process, I became acquainted with libertarian and anarchist philosophers, namely the Austrian school guys, Murray Rothbard, who wrote a book called For a New Liberty that was really amazing, Friedrich Hayek, who wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom, and all these were important. These were important reads during that time because I started to realize that I wasn't the one that was a victim. I was actually victimized by the state, and I realized that the drug war was garbage and that a lot of people are being harmed as a result of it. So I started my activist career then. I started moving in the cypherpunk path similar to what Patrick engaged on, and it was through that process that I came into contact with cryptocurrency and with Bitcoin. Specifically, during the year 2015, I went to the Porcupine Freedom Fest in New Hampshire and used Bitcoin for the first time. I'd become acquainted with it earlier than that, 2013-ish, but I never got seriously involved. But in 2015, I used it firsthand, and I was like, yes, this is really going to change the world. I went back to my wife, and I explained to her, I said, baby, we're getting involved in this technology right now, and we're buying some. So we did. We bought some Bitcoin then. And I started working for Bitcoin.com about that same time, 2015, for Roger, right when he started the company. And I wrote for Bitcoin just until this last September when I basically put in for promotion, said I want to do the conference circuit, I want to talk to people, I want to promote our company, I want to talk about the beauty of cryptocurrencies, subsequently the beauty of psychedelics. So that's my story and how I got here where I'm at today.
Thank you all for being here. Sterlin, I'm glad you're not in jail.
Me too.
Patrick, I'm glad you're not dead.
The night is still young.
So, psychedelic, as we probably all know, means mind manifesting. And all technologies, at their root, come from the imagination. All technologies have been manifested by the mind originally, and are therefore arguably expressions of our consciousness. With that in mind, how is blockchain technology and cryptocurrency an expression of our consciousness?
Want me to take it or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, it's really interesting to think about. When you do a brain scan of the brain, you can see all the different neural networks that are lit up, especially when the brain is activated on something like LSD. Beckley Foundation just came out with all of these amazing scans of how lit up the brain is, and you can see all the connectivity. And when you look at the same with the mycelial network on the planet, right? And oftentimes people in this community, this is not a new metaphor, to compare the networking in the brain with the mycelial network. And then you kind of go out into macro and you see the way that the internet has just webbed out across the entire planet. And it seems to be all kind of directly reflecting this, it's kind of like biomimicry, which is when you design something that mimics the functional relationships found in nature. And so in much of a sense, it feels to me like blockchain and distributed ledgers and the way that all of these networks can speak to each other and information can bounce around in super freely seems to be this, it's almost like where I almost feel like we almost need to credit some of the information and downloads that we've received through working with plant medicine and psychedelics, because it feels like blockchain is directly reflecting some of those things and experiences that we have in the psychedelic state. So it's just very interesting to kind of see all of those connections.
Are you suggesting that Satoshi Nakamura used plant medicine?
I mean, it's hard to know much about that character. There's something extremely psychedelic about the way in which the blockchain works. You know, it's borderless, it's virtual, it's decentralized, it's distributed trust. It's all of these things that we find in the psychedelic experience naturally, and then just on a purely like physical, when you look at a picture of the way that all of this works and that it reflects the way that our brain neurochemistry works and fires, is just super fascinating to me. So
Don't we know that some of the people that were developing cryptography did definitely?
We do. I mean, like John Gilmore is a good example of somebody who was early on developing cryptography and definitely influenced by psychedelics. And I mean, the list goes on in tech.
Yeah, with me, I mean, my introduction to crypto was cypherpunk, which was coined by this lady named Jude Milhound, St. Jude, who was a beautiful human being. I mean, when I was having my phase with all different issues, I could just be honest with her, and she would be very helpful, and she listened. She was involved with John Gilmore, as you just mentioned, and Timothy C. Vey, and it was the list called cypherpunks, and she coined the term, and the list eventually evolved into the list that Satoshi posted his white paper to about blockchain. And I'm undecided whether that's a person or a group of people, because if it's a person, they're a fucking genius, and they're really brilliant in terms of how well this has scaled.
Pretty centralized from my understanding.
I don't know about that. I mean, it's very much interconnected, decentralized groups of individuals who are all parts of different, you could say, marginalized subcultures connecting together and interacting. And that's the basis and the foundation for the entire internet, for crypto, for why we're sitting here right now.
And sort of one of the interesting things about these cypherpunks, specifically Timothy C. May, he wrote the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto, as many of you may know, and one of the things that he talked about was bringing peace back to the individual, bringing anonymity back to the individual, bringing privacy back to the individual. And if there is something that relates directly to the psychedelic experience as far as interpersonal peace, privacy, anonymity, and freedom, it's a person who wants to experience the psychedelic connection and the union with nature, because that's not, you don't go out and have a psychedelic experience with the police officer standing right next to you who's going to probably lock you up as soon as he notices that you're high on a psychedelic compound. So that's one of the interesting things about the cypherpunks and that connection with psychedelia. I think it's definitely true. And it's sort of another side point to that. There used to be this idea that if you worked in Silicon Valley, by the way, the cypherpunks really, if they had a location, I know it was decentralized, but a lot of the founders lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. But a lot of the companies, the tech companies that formed in Silicon Valley, it was almost expected that a lot of the programmers would actually use LSD, and there was a reason there weren't drug tests. So technology, the creation of the computer, creation of the internet, and the use of psychedelics all go hand in hand. It's a very natural phenomenon. It doesn't surprise me that we use the term spiritual technology to describe these shamanic techniques and efforts by indigenous peoples, but by the same token, what we're creating with blockchain is also a technology. Technology, in a sense, is almost like magic. Who was it that said that any decent science is indistinguishable from magic? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the whole cypherpunk connection. There's something to be said of the self-selecting group of people that have showed up here, and that is they are curious. inquisitive. They are anarchists. They have some sort of tendencies around this. They share a lot of the same qualities, the psychedelic community and the crypto community, and values. And it seems to me that people have selected themselves to be here as well, have a very shared mission and a very shared vision for doing something that can positively impact the world and then figuring out how to scale that. And I like to think that psychedelics are this incredible spiritual tool that can cause real transformation, and that blockchain is going to help us scale that at large and give access to that, to these medicines for people all over the world.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how personal responsibility, right? You were talking about anonymity and privacy, but something that I've learned in psychedelic experience is that, like, my life is my life and I need to take care of it. I'm responsible for myself. This is the other thing that first thing I learned about coins was you need to control your own keys. And so that sort of personal responsibility, and then it's almost, there's kind of that joke about the anarchist convention, right? Just no one can decide what it is. And so it's like this kind of loose associations of community, like the one we have here. You guys want to riff on that a little
Communities
bit?
of empowered, autonomous individuals. Yeah, it's super interesting. Radical self-reliance is at large around here, and it's an amazing thing to see. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I might complicate with kind of a lot of psychedelic healing that I've been lucky to watch tapes from MDMA psychotherapy sessions with people suffering from PTSD. And though definitely a piece of the healing process involves recognizing their own ability to change their lives and take responsibility and make change, a lot of that healing also comes from recognizing greater structures or things kind of out of their control that did impact them, and kind of being able to reconcile those two. And so I think that's kind of an important piece, and something that I also find inspiring with my understanding of crypto, is that it is this combination of personal responsibility, but also this responsibility and understanding of the greater systems that we're trying to change and interact with.
Yeah, so this is a really important and powerful connection, I think, this idea of self-responsibility, because here it is, here's the crux of the matter. With crypto, with blockchain technologies, you become your own bank, right? You're the arbiter of your own financial destiny with cryptocurrency. You control your private keys. So in order to do that, you have to have self-responsibility. And I tell you guys what, I do consultation as sort of a side gig. And one of the main things I talk to my clients about is that self-responsibility, that monitoring of your own private keys. And what's really tragic about this is I see a lot of people struggling with this idea of being your own bank and managing your own keys, and that's sort of a testament to this fact that we haven't been in control of our finances or in control of our life, and it's been micromanaged by these bureaucrats and other people who dwell on high, who tend to want to control our lives. So that's an important component of this economic and financial freedom piece that we're dealing with on the blockchain. Now, the same rules apply to psychedelics. In the psychedelic community, a couple of the panelists earlier today, a big theme has been this idea of community, about building systems and working together from the bottom up. What this implies is self-responsibility and finding your appropriate or correct shaman, looking to understand what a compound or a chemical or a plant is before you put it into your body. So leveraging resources like arrowwood, which I think is extremely important. And that's all a piece of this self-knowledge puzzle, because you don't want to put something into your body that could potentially harm you. Or they talked about set and setting earlier, which Timothy Leary was fond of articulating. So if we don't have proper set and setting, we could actually do irreversible harm to our psyche, and what the psychologists and psychiatrists have called persistent perceptual disorder. So this idea of self-responsibility is intimately and intricately intertwined with cryptocurrency. And this is an amazing piece of this whole process that I think we're going to keep analyzing and examining as we move into the future. It's what we're doing right now. We're literally creating these ideas.
Just would like to add that it's radical self-reliance, and then what's so fascinating is that we're able to also build strong networks and community amongst empowered individuals. And I think that's also like the opportunity that we're all coming together around as well.
I think it allows you to help trust the community if you can trust that people are responsible.
Or responsible to themselves, right? Then that creates a trust with the community.
Yeah, well, you cannot ever heal until you take responsibility for yourself. I mean, all the things that happened, they did happen. Nothing's ever going to make them unhappen. So process it in some manner and move onwards, and no one can ever do that for you. With crypto, in my own personal opinions, and I have very divergent groups of friends involved with it. I have, the hacker dorks who started it rolling. I have friends who are speculators who basically gamble and, make money off of crypto, and they really don't know anything about psychedelics in particular, and they don't care. They're there for the game. It's another game, which kind of leads into a very interesting situation. I don't know if anyone really remembers Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street. It was like 1 million years ago, but namaste, Wall Street, you've been occupied. Crypto is really very cool. It's a very liberating force for people who were extremely marginalized financially and in terms of what options were available to them, and it's enabled this entire strata of early adopters and people who are just willing to think different, to enrich their lives, their experiences, and the human condition. It's very cool.
Yeah. So as these networks become built more and more, and as we learn to take care of each other more and more, and we sit with each other in the Zen Dome, we sit with each other in integration circles, it's like, what does the blockchain offer us as far as support? Like, how can information be shared? How can research be moved forward? How can this kind of support be financially incentivized?
Well, in my observations and experience working with different clinical trials, the University of Miami, et cetera, one of the difficulties is where this runs into HIPAA, for instance, which are patients' medical records are confidential and private. So, and their identities are confidential and private. So, all of these different sectors of healthcare have a lot of red tape encumbering them. So the question becomes, how do you get around that? What is it possible to actually, when you say tokenize something, what data can be placed there? How do you measure something, and how do you interact with all these pre-existing systems that apply to healthcare?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity around that. There's a lot of, I imagine a space where we can have a centralized storage of all of our health records, where even like AI can be machine learning and analyzing our health records and recommending interventions to us, and then a place where we can go ahead and use our tokens. Maybe it's a network of preventative wellness centers and clinics beyond just psychedelic therapy clinics, but you're a nutritionist or you're a herbologist or your yoga class or whatever. It can all be kind of, I think there's so much that blockchain has to offer, and the truth is everything is super malleable right now. The future is totally unknown. We're inventing it live here and in action, and it's really, it's really going. There's a lot of factors that will go into how we build this thing out, and it really becomes about our intention behind everything. So yeah.
I have an idea about intention, but I want to speak to this idea first that blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, in general, this trend of decentralization is extremely important because, in my opinion, the greatest impediment to healing and health and wellness are these government bureaucrats, are these people who are trying to put up this red tape, stifle innovation, and immorally put their gun to your head and tell you how to live your life. So what we're going to eventually do, I was in San Francisco a little while back for the Startup Society Summit, and their whole modus operandi was don't argue, build. So that's what we're doing now with these cryptocurrency systems. We're tired of arguing with these politicians. Of course, they're going to stick guns in people's faces and force them to abide by certain nonsensical, overly zealous regulations, but we're going to move beyond that now because we're going to be able to build. Right now, we are building the technologies that will allow us to facilitate health and wellness just as a natural consequence of getting outside the scope of these authoritarian regimes, but also because it's going to allow us to finally innovate, to finally build in ways that allow us to heal people, that allow us to take care of the most impoverished and the people who are having the most difficulties in life. So that's what I say. A+ to the blockchain and F- to the government bureaucrats who want to harm us every step of the way.
Yeah. I would say a big impediment to healthcare that I see is the fact that so many pharmaceutical companies and other health delivery services are forced to be are bound by fiduciary duty to shareholders to maximize their profit.
Exactly.
So in doing that, often the patients suffer and the people they're trying to serve suffer. So I'm really interested in maybe creative ways and other ways to innovate that allow us to put our patients first and not maximizing profit.
Yeah, putting the individual back in control of their destiny. We've designed a sick care system, not a healthcare system, and there's no incentive for doctors to make people well, and there's no incentive for treatments that you only have to use 1 to 3 times. There's no incentive for pharmaceutical companies to develop those treatments because they're very profit-oriented and motivated. And
No,
also
on the obverse, the FDA actively blocks that.
Actively,
they're
yeah.
very upset about
Right.
anything.
Right, because of the way that all this works with political lobbying and money and finance, everything like that.
Though I will have to say that the FDA, at least with MAPS, has been quite supportive,
It's
and we're
true.
expecting in 2021 to have FDA approval for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy to treat PTSD.
Fuck yeah. Rick Doblin rocks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
totally.
to say, working in the policy space, the FDA of all of our government bodies is the one that is most dedicated to the science, and really, like, if you give us rigorous real science, we want people to get better, and we're looking at that. Though, I have issues with the whole system for sure, but just feel
But the FDA is, I mean, you're absolutely right. The FDA is just like this gargantuan organization that has legislative power over approximately 25 cents out of every dollar spent in the United States. It is so staggeringly large, it's impossible to say that it's good or bad. The pilot drugs program, which was rebooted during the 90s, is actually very good. They approved many clinical trials. They're the ones who approved, Ibogaine clinical trials. And they've also approved, TAME, which is the metformin anti-aging trial, which is really fucking amazing because the FDA has basically said, hey, aging is a disease and we should be trying to cure that, which is very cool. So they do cool things. I agree.
They've approved our cannabis study, but the DOJ is currently, and
Blocking
DEA are
it.
involved in blocking that. So.
Yeah, well, we're dealing with these major institutions and major infrastructure, and the systematic issues are so large that to counter them, it's like, what I find, like, one of the things I find fascinating about healthcare is that we separate the mind and the body. We don't actually have integrative medicine that looks at your biomarkers and biofeedback and your brain and to see if emotional states might contribute to chronic healing. And I believe that curing mental suffering can cure chronic illness, and there's more and more science to support that, but we've just, like, all of these institutions and structures have just created divisions and boundaries and red tape and everything, so we don't have an integrative understanding or approach to these problems that we're facing in mass
And
society.
then those structures, like cannabis is a really interesting example, because the structure, like, what is it? Is it cream? Is it a medicine? Is it for fun? Is it,
Right.
like, we can't make sense of this. We can't, like, put it in our
It's
system.
everything.
And then
It's everything.
Yeah, one of the things that I started studying earlier on, my original background was in psychology, got a BA in psychology, and I was working on a master's degree in counseling. Ultimately quit to do the cryptocurrency gig because there was too much bureaucracy and red tape and difficulty in trying to actually work with clients. But one of the things I studied early on is the problem with psychiatry. I mean, psychiatry is this nasty organization that works directly with the FDA, and the relationship is totally based in cronyism and collusion and nastiness. So what they've set up, they've used this bullshit patent system to patent certain drugs and then make those drugs also illegal for anybody to use out of context, and then make curing plants, transformative psychedelics, completely illegal and untouchable by the common man. So they literally have a monopoly over healing. So one of the things that blockchain technology is starting to do is to create this ripe situation where we can start funding curing potentials that actually matter, where we can start funding psychedelic therapies, MDMA-assisted psychotherapies, and start getting these medicines to people who actually need them, so we don't have to rely on the pharmaceutical industrial complex and then passing out these pills that make people fall into a stupor rather than to actually examine themselves, rather than to have any type of healing and wake up. I mean, that's all these compounds do. They talk about this notion of a chemical imbalance in the brain. Well, I think that's bollocks. There's no chemical imbalance in the brain that they can... Most of the studies, and by the way, so you don't think I'm just blowing hot smoke up your ass, you can read Robert Whitaker's book called Anatomy of an Epidemic, who spent a lot of time researching this subject. But these chemicals that they feed you, that they claim correct a chemical imbalance, they actually can't determine the correct medium levels of chemicals, neurotransmitters specifically, that are in the brain. They can only test metabolites through taking cerebral spinal fluid and then looking at those metabolites and then making a determination if a person has a mental illness like bipolar disorder, depression, etc. But the truth is that that's not the case. You can't go to a psychiatrist and pee in a cup or have them swab your mouth and that they would test then and there for a chemical imbalance. But what we found out in the psychedelic communities is what's going on is not a chemical imbalance or not a problem with the person body per se. It's usually a psychospiritual issue. It's an emotional issue. In my experience, it's a relational issue. It's a lack of decent connections in a person's life. So hallelujah to blockchain technology for giving us a new form of wealth via this transfer of wealth to help these people who need it the most and who are in the most dire straits of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to follow that up, how extraordinary to be at this time. Right now, the number one cause of disability globally, according to the World Health Organization, is depression. So 300 million people are suffering, a third of them from intreatable, intractable depression. And so how incredible that at this time of such vast disconnection in our humanity, that these important medicines are coming to light. And at the same time, there's an incredible boon of resources that's practically incomprehensible that's coming in through, and here's this like Venn diagram of where these communities overlap and intersect, and it just like, it's pretty cosmic as far as I can tell, that all of this seems to be happening and aligning all at once. And so, there is some sense I get where I'm like, okay, the universe definitely wants this to happen and wants to support this research and these medicines and this new way of transformation and healing on our planet, and it's doing it through all of you being here. So woo!
To what extent might we run into ethical issues? When we talk about, when we're disrupting an entire healthcare system, be it flawed as it is, and then we have decentralized practitioners, and we have secretive practitioners practicing, in their basements and practicing in various countries and practicing in the jungle, and they have various value systems. They're using various qualities of medicine, and they're using with various skill levels. To just disrupt that, to disrupt something that is centralized in favor of something that's totally decentralized, are there problems there, and can those problems be mitigated by blockchain, or are they exacerbated by blockchain, and in what ways?
So I think in finding some sort of like consistency and some sort of, I think like just the fact of the matter that we can build a community and share resources and do it in a decentralized fashion and do it without any acknowledgement of borders or boundaries, I think that that's a huge benefit and can actually improve and be a tool for, I think blockchain can be a tool for harm reduction in these situations and circumstances. So I think it's a great ally.
I would very strongly agree with that. And it's extremely difficult to, even quantify what exactly is required from any given individual to have a successful experience wherever they choose to journey. I mean, we do medically based. We basically do medical tourism. There's shamans working with molecules out there somewhere who have nothing whatsoever to do with that. So how do you quantify a person's experience? How do they quantify it, and how do you measure it? And that's like, I think there is no specific answer to that right now because it will continue evolving. I mean, Apple had a ridiculously hard time just adding some sensors to their watch to monitor, different things. It requires FDA approval. That's where the internet, nothing matters on the internet because international boundaries are just speed bumps. With blockchain, getting around that, it's the bad people always seem to want to show up and ruin everything. I mean, so now coins are tokens, they're not currency.
Well, I guess I'll speak to this idea of bad people always showing up. Whenever this is the blockchain revolution is the first piece of this puzzle, but we also have to have a philosophical revolution. We have to have an understanding that if we're going to have healing and decency and wellness, and we're going to raise children that are beautiful, that don't have to live in violent environments, we first have to ablate this disease of authoritarianism from the human mind. So we have to educate people on this idea that we can live freely and self-sufficiently without having to rely on central authorities, without having to rely on government. So the philosophical piece comes into that, and it kind of works together, so it's really cool, right? Because now we have blockchain technology coming up, and because it's coming into existence, by virtue of what it does, it's starting to teach people that decentralization efforts are more efficacious in society, and you can see this through how these technologies work. So this is an amazing time that we're here to enjoy. I mean, we are on the precipice of something really grand, something magnificent, and it's going to be based in healing. It's going to be based in wellness. It's going to be based in changing these traditional ways in which society have expected us to live. So I think it's an awesome road that we're paving, this path.
It's a great alliance between the two. It really is. Yeah.
What might we feel like for the most part we're talking about what can psychedelics gain from crypto? What does psychedelics have to offer crypto?
So one of the cool things about psychedelics is that a lot of people who study psychedelics from a research side, but even from an experiential side, have an understanding about human consciousness, and a lot of them have an understanding about human brains, about how neural networks can be expanded with the use of psychedelic compounds, how certain areas of the brain can start to communicate across the corpus callosum. So this is an important aspect of how psychedelics work, and I think how this can impinge on blockchain technology is I think that if we can infuse these ideas that the psychonauts have with blockchain technology, we can increase our artificial intelligence networks and really leverage the way that we think about neural networking, cross-hemispheric communication in the brain. And another piece of this that's really would be really satisfying if we can get maybe a bit more emotional intelligence involved within artificial intelligence, because that's the more humanistic piece of this. And I think it'll be what anybody who's working in the blockchain space or strictly in artificial intelligence and machine learning can actually adopt and bring in and learn from the shamans and the psychedelic people, because we've already got a handle on this aspect of it. So.
And along the lines of emotional intelligence and kind of intuition, I was wondering, there was a quote we had discussed earlier about trust that I don't want to butcher, that I thought was really interesting, like that the crypto.
When you use Bitcoin, you're saying you trust nobody, and when you use psychedelics, you're saying you trust the entire universe?
Yeah.
And so somewhere in the middle is CryptoPsychedelic?
I found that really, really interesting, because for me, a big part of psychedelic healing is this trust, this trusting yourself, this trusting a community, trusting the earth, this trust. And I do, though I also see the lack of trust in crypto, I see this huge trust in a community and in this big idea that from my understanding, it does require a lot of trust. But I am interested in that kind of overlap, and I think the psychedelic community does have a lot to offer in that sense, and being in this trust, this intuition, and kind of a bit more of heart focus. And in fact, I would even go as farther to say a feminine energy. And I've been really inspired seeing some amazing women here in the crypto space speak today. And I was noticing even the different things that those women were bringing into the conversation that were incredibly valuable. I know we've been speaking earlier about the need to bring in lots of different perspectives, but I don't know that we're fully recognizing the difference that those perspectives bring and what we're lacking by not having those perspectives. So I think in that there's a lot, from my understanding of psychedelics, that allow us to understand this balance that's needed between this, we all have, this kind of more feminine, heart-centered, grounded energy, and this more masculine, moving forward, getting things done energy, and how we can best balance that, I think, is what can really serve us moving forward.
Awesome.
This makes me kind of chuckle a little bit, because the cryptocurrency community really needs this kind of love and acceptance and this kind of emotional energy. And I can testify to this firsthand, because we have a lot of divisiveness in a lot of different areas in cryptocurrency movements, because we get really attached.
Right, you're at war.
There's a kind of a war going on.
Bitcoin.org are kind of at war. I read that on Reddit.
You can definitely characterize it like that.
And what's more masculine than war?
Yeah, this is a very valid point, because a lot of you guys have probably heard of the scaling debate in Bitcoin and how to scale Bitcoin appropriately so that the masses can get a hold of it and everybody can use it and we live in hunky-dory happy land. But it hasn't quite worked out like this. Like all technologies have to scale to meet market demand, and that's not always easy, especially when you're dealing with such a complex and decentralized system like blockchain technology. It's a very difficult thing. So just a little anecdote. I was in Los Angeles last week, and I had done a keynote. It was a really fun day at a crypto funding summit, and I went up to this rooftop party. It was a really swanky place. You should check it out. It's called The Standard. And I remember I was up there and we were having a good old time. We were continuing the conversation, networking, talking about cryptocurrency, and somebody asked me my opinion on the scaling debate and how Bitcoin should scale. And of course I gave my tidbit on Bitcoin Cash, and this is a long story and song and dance. So if anybody has questions about that, ask me after the fact. Anyway, so I was having this conversation, and this guy jumped into the middle of the conversation, and he tried to trigger me. He said, "B-Cash is B-Trash. You're B-Trash, man." And I said, "Okay, well, what are your thoughts on that?" And he continued to go on a rant about how he dislikes our particular approach at Bitcoin.com plus my personal approach to scaling a blockchain. And here's the point. There's this miscommunication, this lack of communication. I've written about this on our blog at Bitcoin.com. But as soon as I tried to provide the counterpoints and the counter-arguments and my belief on how this should work, he just kept cutting me off and screaming B-Trash and B-Cash really loud. And I said, listen, if you're not interested in hearing what I have to say, then me and my compatriots here can take the conversation elsewhere. And that's exactly what happened. He just kept going, ranting on his tangent. So you can already see, and I'm not going to say that I handled the situation the best that I could have. I probably could have done a lot better. But I'm constantly thinking about how to use my psychedelic reasoning, how to use compassionate communication, relational anarchism, and connect with people on a fundamental level. And I probably failed that night, but as a result of the couple of old fashions that I had, I probably wasn't feeling particularly compassionate at that point in time. But I tried my best. I didn't engage him and continue on. But this is an ongoing feud in the cryptocurrency space. And a lot of people say code is law, code rules. Well, code is fine. Code is good. It's what creates the protocols that we have. But as human beings, we still have to be able to connect and work together. If we can't work together and connect, we can't build forward. We can't move forward. We can't transform the society that we live in. So we've got to have communications. We've got to leverage Marshall Rosenberg's idea about nonviolent communication. All these different beautiful ideas have got to happen to make us continue pushing forward.
Want to say anything about bringing that feminine energy forward?
Yeah, I mean, I
into the
I
crypto
just
space?
want to echo everything that's been said. I think it's so critically important, and it is the opportunity if we're going to actually integrate the psychedelic experience, the amount of awareness and compassion and empathy, the awareness of our environment, the connection with nature. All of these things are inherent within the psychedelic experience, and I think that the more that we can integrate that into not only the businesses we design, but the code and the way in which we choose to build this network from here moving forward, it once again comes down to intention, much like the psychedelic experience is extremely malleable. And it's really, the reason why it's so focused on when you're going into a new journey, really thinking about cultivating your intention and really thinking about what you want to work on within yourself, what you want to ask of the medicine. All of these things are all the pre-work that goes into having a successful and healing experience with psychedelics. And I would say that the same sort of preparation needs to go into any considerations that we make when we're designing these new technologies that can have this mass impact on the planet.
And maybe I'll add along this, like, kind of ground this, maybe hippier sounding feminine energy kind of conversation. I recently was reading about a study on like fight or flight that had been done in rats, but it turns out it was all male rats. And when they did the study, the women rats had what they called tend and befriend as their response instead of fight or flight. So it was just like this really interesting, for me, way of understanding different ways of showing up and how that impacts our actions.
Right. It almost negates, because when I think about cryptocurrency seems to be built on rewards. If you do a certain thing, you do a certain amount of work or something, you get a reward of a token. And on the other hand, it's like loving kindness is kind of its own reward. It's like if that's what heals people, like what else? Like why would you need something else to make that better?
Delayed views.
Yeah.
That's basically the whole dichotomy of everything, but non-dualism rocks, because, I mean, we're talking about blockchain, but if we talk about cryptocurrency, what is all of that all about? It runs on fear and greed. That's not a great big secret. There's a bull and a bear there, not a heart and a big hug. It's about the fucking money. What is psychedelic healing about? It's about love, light, empathy, compassion, and holding that space. So how do you integrate all that? Well, non-dualism is a reasonable answer, accepting all of it and just seeing what can be done moving forward. But personally, as someone who does speculate in crypto, I'm a bad person. I make money off crypto. It's very hard to reconcile those two aspects in some ways.
Well, I see psychedelic kind of healing often working with people's fear and kind of allowing people to not be driven by it from a space of fear and instead operate from a place of love or compassion. So I wonder how that might impact, I don't know, the fear and greed mentality.
I sort of want to take a poll. Who makes money off crypto? Who feels like they can enter into a place of loving kindness for their brothers and their sisters? Cool.
Yeah, well, I'd like to actually challenge those of us who understand that we are just making money and speculating and participating in this weird system to, I mean, like, the reason why I do it is this is kind of like there's faults in this notion, but I'd like to think that those of us that are engaged with that activity are reinvesting into our community and reinvesting into the future that we want to build together and the technologies that we believe in. And so, if we are doing that, it's coming from this place of empathy for the entire world. It's not coming from a place of fear and greed, right? And so if we go back to just like, again, it's like we need to maybe create this container and hold space as we move forward as this larger community, as we're building this stuff out, so that we're ensuring that that is what we are cultivating and the things that we are building.
That's a very good answer. Let's go.
Yeah, this right here really is what it means to be crypto psychedelic. This idea of having love and compassion, bringing that to the cryptocurrency space is of utmost importance. This is one of the things that kind of fires me up a little bit, because there was a reason, there was a quasi-political, I say quasi-political because I don't really like the word political, but there was a philosophical reason why blockchain systems, why cryptocurrencies were created. Patrick was kind enough to delve into that with the cypherpunk movement. And so what's happened recently is sort of the core supporters of blockchain and cryptocurrency have sort of, their voice has been lost in the madness of everybody sort of having this fear of missing out, this FOMO that is massively surrounding the cryptocurrency space. So all these institutional investors and institutional money is coming in the space, and these guys have dollar signs on the brain, and they either forgot about or have never even heard of the cypherpunk movement. They don't even consider decentralization. They just want to make a quick buck. And these guys are the primary culprits of this idea that we refer to as greed that are entering into this space. So that's one of the reasons why I love doing what I do, because I get to go, and this group is the exception because everybody here is super compassionate, right? So this group is the exception, but I get to go to these cryptocurrency talks. I was in one in Texas called the Texas Bitcoin Conference, and I just went up there, and my whole talk was on the cypherpunk movement, and I just wanted to remind folks, this is where we come from. This idea is ending this problem of trust, having to trust in these third parties, having to trust in the central authorities. And if we forget about this, we'll lose the focus, the intention, as she pointed out, in regards to cryptocurrency and what we're doing. So this is extremely important to keep this trajectory in mind and to let people know why we're doing it. So that makes me happy that we're here with crypto and psychedelic, because a little psychedelic love is needed in the cryptocurrency space, no doubt.
So I'd like to thank you.
Crypto love is still needed needed in psychedelic space.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
Symbiotic relationship.
Yes, exactly.
So I'd like to thank you all for being part of this. And in closing, I would just like to remind you that your life is an immutable blockchain. You cannot change the past. Every block that you create is there forever. So make blocks of loving kindness.